I can't abide by this idea that schools need to be closed, that parents who advocated for open schools were racist. It's a lie. You have to challenge a lie. My name is Jennifer Say, and this is my story. I am a mother of 4, former Levi's brand president, author, and filmmaker. When I was about 5, I fell in love with Nadia Comaneci at the 1976 Olympics. So I begged my parents to take me to the local gym, and I just fell in love. I mean, if you've watched gymnastics, you know it's amazing. It's like flying, and I really took to it right away. By the time I was 10 years old, I made my first national team. And then by the time I was 14, I begged to go to an even better gym so that I could break into the top 6, which is like Olympic material. And I loved it until I didn't, because it is, as many people know, an incredibly cruel and abusive sport. I trained on broken bones. I trained on a broken ankle for 2 years. Our weight was announced on the loudspeaker. You know, at 18, we were expected to have 1-2% body fat. I didn't get my period till I was 19 years old. It was definitely a mark against you if you got your period. Like, that was bad, which is kind of insane, right? It forces you to be anorexic. And sexual abuse was rampant in the sport as well, which has now come to light. I did not suffer sexual abuse, but it was everywhere. Everyone knew, but you weren't allowed to talk about it. Despite all the cruelty, I became the national champion in 1986. I was a 7-time national team member. But sadly, amidst my success, I left the sport quite broken, emotionally and physically. I walked away in the spring of 1988, a few months before the Olympic trials. I left for college. I wasn't speaking with my parents. They were devastated that I'd left the sport. I also struggled a bit in college. I was so tired. I'd had a whole career, but I found friends that valued me for my mind and my heart and, you know, not necessarily the fact that I was this gymnast. I didn't talk about it. Many didn't even know. Yeah, I don't know. I made a different choice. I said, that's not going to define me. I'm more than an athlete. I'm going to get over this stupid eating disorder that was instilled in me. And I'm going to do something. Despite all of the trauma I endured, I am a huge supporter of youth sports. They teach kids resilience. They teach you to lose, which I think is really, really important, which is why I'm not a fan of everyone gets a trophy. Teaches you if you can't do something, if you work hard at it, you could master it. You just got to find the right coach that believes that sports are a tool to develop the whole child. So despite all of this recovery from gymnastics, my solution at that point was to stop therapy and write a book. And it was the first-person account of the abuse and cruelty in the sport. You weren't supposed to say the things I said. You didn't talk about coaches being abusive. You didn't talk about the national team coach being a rapist. You kept that secret to protect the reputation of the sport. And I didn't. So when the story of Larry Nassar broke, the USA team gymnastics doctor who abused over 500 athletes, I was there for the survivors. And they trusted me. And that's when I decided to make the film, Athlete A. Young girls and women across sports, even beyond gymnastics, came forward to tell stories of abuse in the sport and demand change from the governing bodies and across the world. And there's reforms being made. So that's what I feel really proud of. I found Levi's in 1999. I'd had a few other jobs. I'd worked at the Gap in corporate, at an agency, and I found Levi's, and the culture spoke to me. You know, the brand, the reputation is one that celebrates rugged individualism, and I felt like I found this culture where I could be myself. I worked my way up the ladder, and I worked my way up to the marketing director in the US. And then eventually I became the chief marketing officer in 2013. I was very successful in the role as CMO. I helped the company through basically come back from near bankruptcy in 2011 and bring the brand back to relevance. Eventually in 2020, I became the brand president after 22 years at the company. In March 2020, I started to speak out about the closures and the lockdowns. By the fall of that year, I got my first talking to by a peer. You really maybe kind of shouldn't say these things, Jen. When you speak on behalf of the company, I was told. I said, no, I don't. I'm a mom with kids in public school. Having been a child that no one stood up for, I knew children try to please adults for the most part. They'll stay quiet even when they're suffering. The line, kids are resilient, they'll be fine. They're not fine. And for me, this crossed over into abuse. Isolating children at home for 18 months with nowhere to play, no friends to see, no school, which is their life. We've taken everything away from them. We've told them they don't matter, they're not essential, and their needs don't matter. Oh, and by the way, if you're suffering, you're selfish. Yeah, I spoke up from the very beginning, and I went from having about 5 minutes of people liking me for Athlete A to being hated on a much bigger stage than I was accustomed to. I didn't start in March 2020 thinking I could lose my job, but I would say a year in, it became very clear that my job was at risk. And I, at that point, probably in February or March 21, decided that's okay. I'll keep going. I can't abide this hypocrisy. I can't abide by this idea that these executives, my peers, would send their own children to $60,000 a year private schools while telling me I couldn't advocate for San Francisco public schools to open, which are 60% low-income children. The idea that schools need to be closed, that parents who advocated for open schools were racist, it's a lie. You have to challenge a lie. It's dangerous not to. But eventually in January of 2022, the CEO, my boss, told me there wasn't a place for me at the company any longer. He offered me severance of $1 million. That would have come with a non-disclosure agreement, which I was unwilling to sign. So I quit in a very public fashion, bridge-burning fashion, one might say, because as much as my journey started in speaking out on behalf of children and against the tyranny of the lockdowns, as I progressed, what became more alarming was the censorship and the silencing and the canceling that prevents others from speaking up. So I wasn't going to sign a non-disclosure agreement because to me that felt too hypocritical. So I gave up not just $1 million, but a possible CEO career at Levi's, a company I spent 23 years working in. I would say my views largely aligned with most folks at the company. If anything, they were further left in terms of the candidates I preferred. I had been outspoken about who I voted for and about left-leaning causes. Nobody said, oh, you can't talk about politics on social media or in the workplace. But the minute I veered from the orthodoxy on COVID, which was stay home forever until we tell you you're allowed to leave the house, then I was evil. I wasn't just somebody who disagreed with the policy. I was evil. Like, you can't even ask a question and you just get shunted. I think the hardest part of the last few years is colleagues and friends who have ejected me because of my views on this one subject. These are people that know what's in my heart. They know the arc of my life. It didn't matter that they'd known me since I was 29 years old. They were all too willing to just go with the crowd and vilify anyone that asked a simple question. When I look back at my life so far, I think it is defined by key moments where I made really difficult choices. I walked away from gymnastics. I disappointed my family and my coaches. When I wrote the book about gymnastics, it was in the hopes of protecting children that were still doing the sport. And when I walked away from Levi's, I don't regret that either. It was in service of truth so that I could speak the truth freely in defense of children and in the name of progress. Nothing stands in the way as much as censorship. And my hope is that it inspires other folks to do the same, because there's so many people, the silent majority, who see the lies and are too afraid to speak up. And we all need to, because right now we're living at the behest of a tyrannical minority, demanding that we uphold lies. But I think we're the majority. Thank you for watching this video. To continue to make PragerU videos and content available for free, I would love it if you would consider making a tax-deductible donation.